Good morning, everybody. Today I will be presenting pre-op evaluation of liver transplant recipients. A brief overview about my lecture today. I will be discussing which are the patients which need transplantation, when they need transplantation, that is the timing and the importance, and how we have to evaluate the patient for transplant, that is the various system examination for these patients. Firstly, coming to who are the patients who need transplantation. Transplantation is required in any end-stage liver disease which may be due to cirrhosis, acute liver failure or acute on chronic liver failure. Now, why is the etiology important? The etiology of the patients is important because apart from affecting the liver, many diseases also affect the other system by the disease process itself. For example, alcoholic liver disease, which is the most common cause of cirrhosis in India. It commonly leads to dilated cardiomyopathy and coronary artery disease. Thus, cardiac evaluation becomes very important in these patients. Another disease which affects cardiovascular system is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. It leads to metabolic syndrome and coronary artery disease. In fact, coronary vascular disease is the leading cause of mortality in non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. There are studies in which the carotid intimal thickness, which is a surrogate marker of atherosclerosis, has been found to be significantly higher in patients with NASH as compared to the hereditary controls. Thus, cardiovascular evaluation, particularly for the presence of coronary artery disease, becomes very important in patients having non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Then there are diseases in which hypercoagulability may be present in the preoperative period itself, like primary biliary sclerosis, primary sclerosing cholangitis, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, and malignancies. These patients may have portal thrombosis in the preoperative period, and it predisposes the patients to a higher risk of bleeding in the intraoperative period during thrombectomy. So we have to take into account hypercoagulability of the patient in the preoperative period itself. Then there are diseases like polycystic disease and primary hyperoxaluria, in which kidney involvement may be present, and patients may be in renal replacement therapy in the preoperative period, and we have to look into these before taking up the patient for transplant. Diseases like alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency predispose the patient to development of emphysema and severe obstructive lung disease, and this must be optimized in the preoperative period before taking up the patient for transplant. Then we must also look into whether there are any contraindications are present for transplant or not, and these patients must be excluded from transplantation. In the absence of significant comorbidities, even older age, more than 70, is not a contraindication to liver transplantation. All obese patients must undergo a dietary counseling prior to transplantation, and obesity class 3 is a relative contraindication but not an absolute contraindication for liver transplantation. So when do we post a patient for transplant? Any patient with MELD more than 15, the listing for liver transplantation is done. Now, why is the severity of disease, that is MELD and CTP, important? Because though initially they were developed for waitlist mortality, they also tell us about the post-transplant prognosis of the patient. Studies have found that patients with MELD more than 25 are at a greater risk of post-transplant morbidity and mortality than patients with lesser MELD. Thus, timing of transplantation becomes very important. Finally, coming to how do we evaluate the patient for transplantation. Now, I will be discussing various systemic examinations. Firstly, coming to the cardiovascular evaluation of liver transplant recipients. These patients may have ischemic heart disease, cirrhotic cardiomyopathy, systolic and diastolic dysfunction, heart failure, portopulmonary hypertension, and prolonged QTc on ECG. The prevalence of CAD has been found to be normal or rather increased in liver transplant recipients than the normal population. The American Journal of Cardiology in 2006 gave 6 risk factors for the predisposition of coronary artery disease in liver transplant recipients, which were age more than 50 years, male gender, hypertension, altered lipid metabolism, diabetes mellitus, and obesity. Presence of 2 or more factors predispose the patient to development of CAD in the perioperative period, and thus if more than 2 factors are present, then the patient must definitely be evaluated for the presence of coronary artery disease. Now, why are we concerned about the coronary artery disease during liver transplantation? We are concerned because if the patient has predisposition for coronary artery disease, the patient has worse outcome, and in fact it has been found that a 1-year mortality has been as high as 40% in those patients undergoing liver transplantation which had predisposition for coronary artery disease. Coming to cirrhotic cardiomyopathy. These patients have blunted contractile responsiveness to stress and may have diastolic relaxation abnormality with electrophysiological abnormality. So when a normal heart is exposed to portal hypertension, there is release of toxins derived from the GI tract, which lead to reduced SVR and adrenergic activation. These all lead to hyperdynamic syndrome and impaired diastolic function, exercise intolerance, and QT prolongation. When these abnormal physiology is exposed to precipitating factors such as liver transplant, sepsis, and TIPS, it leads to heart failure, pulmonary edema, hypotension, shock, and arrhythmias in the perioperative period. So cirrhotic cardiomyopathy patients, they are prone to develop these problems, and we must be very cautious and try and prevent them in the perioperative period. Coming to diastolic dysfunction. It often precedes systolic dysfunction, or it may be present along with the systolic dysfunction. The patients with diastolic dysfunction are predisposed to pulmonary edema and heart failure following liver transplantation. Systolic dysfunction. This is mostly latent in patients undergoing liver transplantation, and it is because of the decreased beta-adrenergic receptor density and negative inotropic effect of cannabinoid and nitric oxide, which are upregulated in cirrhosis. Systolic dysfunction leads to rightward shift of the LV pressure volume curve, making these patients at a high risk of pulmonary edema in the perioperative period. Coming to prolonged QTC interval. As high as 45% of the patients undergoing liver transplantation due to cirrhosis have prolonged QTC interval. It has been found that the prolongation of QTC increases as the grading of child increases. Now, why are we concerned about the prolonged QTC interval? Because it may lead to sudden cardiac death after liver transplantation, and all the correctable causes of prolonged QTC must be corrected before taking up the patient for liver transplantation. Coming to cardiac evaluation. Cardiac evaluation is done by initially ECG in all the patients. Since most patients cannot undergo an exercise testing, thus dobutamine stress echo is done in almost all the patients. A transthoracic echocardiography and a saline contrast echo is again done in all the patients. Coronary calcium score and coronary angiogram, both of these tests are only reserved in case we are suspecting or the patient is at high risk of coronary artery disease. Dobutamine stress echo almost has 100% negative predictive value for presence of coronary artery disease in liver transplantation, and thus it is recommended as an initial screening test in all the patients. And if the patient has a positive dobutamine stress echo test, then the patient must undergo a cardiac catheterization. Transthoracic echocardiography is recommended again in all the patients, and it helps us evaluate the cardiac chamber sizes, the systolic and the diastolic dysfunction, valvular functions, pulmonary artery pressure, any functional or significant left ventricular outflow obstruction, and pericardial effusion. Some of the common echocardiographic findings in cirrhotics are, we may find LA is dilated, there may be increased pulmonary or systolic flows due to the presence of hyperdynamic circulation, there may be a normal or elevated RV pressure, the left ventricular end diastolic volume may be increased, and the pulmonary pressures may be increased. We also find diastolic dysfunction in a number of patients. This is a video in which in some of the patients we might find that due to ascites, there is pseudodyskinesis of the left ventricular posterior wall. So this also has to be taken into account in the preoperative period itself. Coming to coronary artery calcification scoring. It quantifies the calcium plaque area by higher attenuation index of calcium, and a scoring more than 400 places the patient at a very high risk of single vessel disease. This also has a very high negative predictive value. If the patient has a higher score, then the patient must undergo a coronary angiogram to rule out the presence of coronary artery disease. The disadvantages of calcium scoring is that there is a need for tight heart control. Breath holding may be needed during the test, which is difficult for patients with tense ascites, and a contrast-induced renal impairment may occur in these patients which may already have a compromised renal system. Coronary angiography. It is done in case there is an abnormal, non-invasive test or a high test pre-test probability for coronary artery disease. So for pre-op cardiovascular evaluation, if the patient has more than 2 coronary artery disease risk factors, then a coronary angiogram has to be done in all the patient. If the patient is at no risk or a lower risk for coronary artery disease, still a non-invasive ischemic test has to be done, like a DSC or a TMT, and if it is positive, then a coronary angiogram has to be done. For the other diseases, a transthoracic echocardiography is done, and if we find that there is severe LV dysfunction, a left ventricular outflow tract obstruction, or a severe RV dysfunction, the pulmonary pressures are elevated, a severe valvular disease or intracardiac shunts, then we must refer the patient to a cardiologist to optimize the concerned condition. Like the patient may need a revascularization before undergoing liver transplantation. Management for heart failure and valvular disease may be needed before taking up the patient for transplantation. In case we are suspecting a severe pulmonary POPH, then we might need a right heart catheterization. Coronary stenting prior to liver transplantation. If the patient has undergone bare metal stenting, then we must wait for at least 1 month for liver transplantation. And in case of drug-eluting stent, we must wait for at least 6 months. Since these patients are on dual antiplatelet, we have to wait for the period of time that has been mentioned. However, in cases where there is an emergency, the timing has to be individualized based on the urgency of procedure and the risk of bleeding. Coming to pulmonary evaluation. The pulmonary involvement in cirrhosis may be hepatopulmonary syndrome, portopulmonary syndrome. There might be a restrictive lung disease due to hepatic hydrothorax, tense ascites, or interstitial lung edema, or there might be respiratory muscle wasting. So we have to take a thorough history and examination in all the patients. The initial screening methods for pulmonary evaluation is a chest radiograph, a pulse oximetry, and lung function test. For diagnosis, we have to do an arterial blood gas. In this, an alveolar arterial gradient of more than 15 or more than 20 in age more than 64 tells us that the patient may have HPS. We might also find hyperventilation and respiratory alkalosis in a few patients. Contrast echocardiography has to be done if we are suspecting HPS, and the presence of bubbles in the left cavity between the 4th and 6th beat of HPS tells us that the patient has a pulmonary vascular dilatations and is again diagnostic of HPS. Technetium labeled macro-aggregated albumin scan is done, and for HPS the cerebral uptake is more than 6%. The International Liver Transplant Practice Society recommends that any patient with severe hypoxemia due to HPS has to be expedited for liver transplantation. A pulse oximetry is an initial screening test, and ABG has to be definitely done to diagnose HPS. A saline contrast echocardiography, as mentioned previously, tells us intrapulmonary vascular dilatations, and a MAA scan helps us distinguish between the hypoxia due to HPS and due to any other cointrinsic cardiopulmonary disease. Coming to POPH, the screening has to be done by a transthoracic Doppler echocardiography. And if we are suspecting that the pulmonary pressures are increased, then we do a right heart catheterization. A PA-targeted therapy has to be initiated if there is moderate to severe POPH. And in case patients have severe POPH, it is an absolute contraindication for liver transplantation. Coming to renal dysfunction. The presence of renal dysfunction in patients undergoing liver transplantation have been found to be as high as 30%. Why are we concerned with this renal dysfunction in the pre-op period? Because it leads to inferior patient survival, increased cost post-transplant, sepsis, increased need of replacement therapy, and longer ICU stays. So what is the problem with diagnosing renal dysfunction in patients with cirrhosis? Because these patients have a lower creatinine level due to lower muscle mass. New markers have come up like cystatin C and neutrophil gelatinase associated lipocalin, which are not universally available and not very commonly used in all the centers. So whenever we get any patient for liver transplant evaluation, we have to first see whether the GFR is normal or not. If the GFR is not normal, then we have to establish whether the renal dysfunction is acute or chronic by seeing the previous records. If the patient's renal dysfunction is acute, then we have to see whether it is pre-renal, parenchymal or postrenal. And we have to optimize the patient for the acute renal dysfunction in the preoperative period by correcting the acute renal dysfunction before taking up the patient for transplantation. Then we have to also see whether there is any metabolic disturbance like electrolytes in the patient, and this has to be corrected in the preoperative period. Patients with chronic renal disease may need a dialysis in the preoperative period, and the details of the dialysis has to be seen, and the electrolytes again have to be optimized in the preoperative period. If the patient has chronic renal disease, the patient may be a candidate for combined liver kidney transplant, and this has also to be looked into in the preoperative period. Coming to the evaluation of coagulation system. The coagulation system are routinely evaluated before surgery. However, no correction has to be given before surgery. Why no correction has to be given? Because no link between the coagulation defects and bleeding has been found in the studies. In fact, it has been found if we correct the coagulation defects in the preoperative period, it may lead to increased transfusion of products during the transplant. Now, why the transfusion of products in the preoperative period leads to increased transfusion? It is because it leads to increased portal pressure, which may increase the bleeding in the intraoperative period, and it also places the patient at increased risk of transfusion associated other reactions and problems. Coming to the CNS evaluation, assessment and correction of hepatic encephalopathy must be done in the preoperative period, especially in case of acute liver failure. Electrolytes and glucose, sodium and potassium must be optimized before surgery. Generally, we do not accept any patient with sodium less than 125 for elective liver transplantation. What is the problem with decreased preoperative sodium? It leads to a short-term graft survival, and preoperative hyponatremia also places the patient at risk of sepsis, renal dysfunction, and encephalopathy. Apart from hyponatremia is also a problem in the perioperative period and must be corrected before taking up the patient for transplantation. Hyponatremic patients have been seen to have more mortality in the perioperative period, and they have a higher requirement for renal support and ventilation in the perioperative period. Thus, both hyper and hyponatremia must be corrected before taking up the patient for any elective transplant. We must also not forget that what are the grades of varices, because any higher grade of varices such as grade 3 and 4 and gastric varices, transesophageal echocardiographic probe cannot be put because of the risk of bleeding, and we must take care of this in the preoperative period itself. All cultures must be negative for any patient undergoing elective transplant. A nutritional assessment must be done. Presence of sarcopenia must be noted because these patients are at risk of prolonged postoperative mechanical ventilation in the postoperative period. Ascites must be noted, and if the patient has tense ascites leading to shortness of breath, it may be drained a few days before the surgery. Serology for the infections must be noted, and psychological assessment must be done. A few words about acute liver failure. Acute liver failure patients have most of the patients have cerebral edema, and in fact around 20 to 25% of the patients, they die of cerebral edema in patients with acute liver failure. So the assessment of cerebral edema should be made in patients with acute liver failure with non-invasive tests like optic nerve sheath diameter. A CT may be done in which may show the absence of sulci and gyri, and a transcranial Doppler or a pupillary assessment has to be also done to see the progression of cerebral edema if it is present. If the cerebral edema is done, it has to be treated in the preoperative period by head elevation, airway and ventilation control, sedation and analgesia, and hyperosmolar therapy. Other than cerebral edema, we must make sure that if the patient needs ventilatory support due to deuterating lung function or a higher grade of HE, it has to be given. Inotropic support may be needed in patients with acute liver failure in the preoperative period itself due to circulatory dysfunction and must be given. We must try and control infection as much as possible in the preoperative period for acute liver failure. These patients are predisposed to hypoglycemia, and thus glucose maintenance is very important in the preoperative period. And lastly, again, electrolyte disturbances must be corrected in the preoperative period for acute liver failure. So when should we not take a patient for acute liver failure for transplant? If the patient has a compromised brainstem function in the preoperative period itself, then we do not post the patient for transplant if they have acute liver failure. Any invasive fungal infection is again a contraindication for transplantation. Rapidly escalating or a very high dose of inotrope is again a contraindication for acute liver failure. A few words about COVID disease. Before asking the patient to come from home, we must screen for symptoms and fever before calling from home for transplantation. Ideally, transplantation in positive transplant candidates should be delayed for at least 14 to 21 days after symptom resolution. And we must get at least 1 or 2 negative RT-PCR samples before taking up the patient for transplant. The decision to proceed in COVID disease is, however, we have to individualize the patient depending on the emergency for the transplant. This is just a summary of various systemic examinations that we must do for patients undergoing liver transplantation. Thank you.